Now I want to say that I'm using a tweet here, because I'm not going to subscribe to Glenn Greenwald's Substack. I'm sorry, Glenn. But a while ago, Glenn Greenwald was on Joe Rogan, and on the Joe Rogan program, he was talking about how like trans people are like forced to get surgeries when they're like 5 years old, how like trans ideology is killing children. Joe Rogan was talking about that because Joe Rogan's a piece of garbage, right? Like Joe Rogan is, in my opinion, as a trans person, right? I think Joe Rogan is probably one of, if not the most harmful people on the internet for people like me. Most of the people that tell me to kill myself in YouTube comments, they're Joe Rogan fans. Most of the people, right, that tell me that like I'm killing children, they're Joe Rogan fans. Joe Rogan has had a negative impact on transgender people everywhere on the internet, so I want to say that. But Glenn Greenwald, I used to respect this guy. Glenn Greenwald, he was pretty cool for a lot of he was big on the exposing corruption in Brazil's Bolsonaro administration. He was big on that, right? He himself has been persecuted for being gay. He himself has been persecuted in his home country for being gay. And Glenn Greenwald recently on Substack, and again, I don't have a subscription, so I'm going off of a Twitter post here, recently on Substack is again reiterating his opinions on transgender people. For what reason? This guy has had death threats every single day since exposing Bolsonaro's corruption in Brazil. Primarily because he's homosexual. And yet, he's going to traffic those similar conspiracy theories. And again, it's even worse because there's some self-realization here. So, I'm just going to read this little bit here. When I was on Joe Rogan's program 3 weeks ago, I told the story of a dinner I had in 2019 with two respected journalists who both have teenage daughters. One dating a 17-year-old trans boy and the other whose best friend is a 15-year-old trans boy. Both have had surgery to remove their breasts. These are leftist journalists who are fanatically pro-LGBT and trans rights, but wondered, as parents of teenagers, at what age a child is emotionally and psychologically capable of making those choices. It was a fascinating and thought-provoking discussion, but one which, I realized afterward, they would never be willing to express in a column or interview for fear of having their reputations destroyed. That is a toxic and deeply unhealthy climate. Glenn Greenwald is the modern-day Sam Harris.
All of a sudden, we can't talk about Neanderthal DNA anymore.
Literally. This is a Sam Harris argument. Like this clip here, I'm going to play it again.
All of a sudden, we can't talk about Neanderthal DNA anymore.
This clip here is from Sam Harris's big-brained piece that, if it just so happened that black people had, high rates of Neanderthal DNA, that, we wouldn't be able to talk about Neanderthal DNA because it would be called racist. It's the same fucking bullshit, and I'm extremely disappointed in Glenn Greenwald for trafficking this garbage. Now, I have a question for Glenn Greenwald. Again, Glenn Greenwald has been persecuted for being gay in Brazil, right? He has received death threats for being gay. I would love to ask, at what age did Glenn Greenwald know he was gay? Personally, I knew that I had same-sex attractions when I was a very young child. I had same-sex attractions. I had opposite-sex attractions when I was like 10 years old, right? That's around when most people get their first crush, right? Now, I was in a position where I had to repress that kind of feeling for at least another decade, right? But that doesn't mean that I didn't have those feelings. I'm a trans woman, right? I remember wanting to be a woman, wanting to be a girl when I was like 7 years old. I remember having these feelings. I had to repress those feelings, right? Doesn't mean I didn't have them. All it meant was I had to wait longer before I could actually become who I really am. So again, I want to say shame on Glenn Greenwald for this stupid garbage. It's one thing to have Joe Rogan go on a tangent while you're on his show and just to let him talk and just get over with and then move on to another subject. That's one thing. But to reiterate this stuff weeks later is disgusting. And it gets even worse because there's some sort of self-realization here, some self-awareness. So, have no opinion whatsoever on the argument it makes. Though I did watch her Joe Rogan appearance and listen to her Megyn Kelly interview and found several questions she raised to be reasonable and worthy of further examination. This is on some transphobic author, by the way. So some questions that were raised were reasonable and worthy of further examination. Again, Sam Harris shit. Oh, this is just a thought experiment. Some of that stuff we should talk about. So, okay, let's talk about it, Glenn. Glenn, you want to come on my show? This is an open invitation to Glenn Greenwald. You want to talk to a transgender woman about trans stuff? I'm here. Open invitation, right? Glenn Greenwald's not going to come on my show because he doesn't want to have those conversations. He wants to have the idea in his head that maybe someday he'll have those conversations, right? It's a thought experiment. We should talk about these things. But whenever someone offers the platform for him to talk about those things, I don't know. He doesn't end up doing anything about it. So again, tweet at Glenn Greenwald. When I post this video, tweet at Glenn Greenwald. This is an open invitation to Glenn. Do you want to talk to a trans person about these legitimate questions that need further examination? I'm right here. Let's do it. I confess to an instinctive discomfort with the book's title, Irreversible Damage, the Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, as redolent of a destructive trope long used against gay men as predators seeking to recruit and seduce children into becoming gay. So again, Glenn Greenwald has the self-awareness enough to know, okay, maybe what these people are saying isn't in good faith. Maybe what these people are saying is what the same people who give me death threats every single day have been saying for the past 10 years of my life. Right? But he still traffics this stuff as legitimate questions that need further examination. And again, Glenn, you want to come on my program? Open invitation. I will literally wake up at 4 a.m. if you want to come on my show, because let's be honest, that would give me a lot of views, right? But again, he's not going to do that. Glenn Greenwald's not going to go on a podcast with a transgender person and talk about these things. And if he does, more power to him. More power to him. But he's not going to. That's my guess. And again, it's one thing to have Joe Rogan go off on like one of those like, I hate transgenders, they're evil, they're so powerful, they beat the shit out of real women. I'm Joe Rogan, I've proved this message. I'm Joe Rogan, look at me, I smoke weed and I'm smart, look at me, I'm Joe. Isn't it weird how gay people are allowed to be in public and kiss, man? I'm Joe Rogan, trans people are icky. Like, again, if you want to watch someone smoke weed on webcam and pontificate, I'm right here, right? I'm right here. Joe Rogan's not your guy. But again, it's one thing to listen to Joe Rogan go on like a crazy uncle tangent, and another to 3 weeks after the fact reminisce. It's like, oh yeah, remember, I was on Joe Rogan when he was talking about the trans issue. And to not pose anything. Oh, I just want to have these conversations. All right, Glenn. All right. Let's have those conversations. But again, it's a little pathetic. It's a little pathetic. And I expect more of Glenn Greenwald. It's unfortunate that Glenn Greenwald is going the way of Sam Harris. Literally. Like that. I'm like, I used to read Sam Harris books. Like when I was a teenager, when I was like 15, 16, I read every Sam Harris book because I thought I had a big brain. I was like, hell yeah, these thought experiments. I love thought experiments. I love thinking. I love experimenting. And then you realize, wait a second, I'm learning nothing. I'm learning about potential things that people could talk about, but no one's actually talking about them. Like, what? And then, like, it's a slippery slope from, it's a slippery slope from, well, what if black people had Neanderthal DNA to...
All of a sudden, we can't talk about Neanderthal DNA anymore.
I love it. It's so good. Oh, man. But again, shame on Glenn Greenwald. Cringe, in other words.